Welcome back to the Intuition Incubator. I have with me a very special guest named Joanne. And listeners, you are going to want to hear this story. We're going to talk about psychedelics. We're going to talk about love. And we're going to talk about all these things happening right around the age of 80. This is an amazing, inspirational story. I was so excited when I got to meet you, Joanne, and to hear your story. And I'm so thankful that you were willing to come on and share it and be an inspiration for everyone here. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So Joanne and I met in a very interesting way. And one of the reasons that I asked you to come on this show is because you have such an incredible story, an incredible love story that happened at 80 years old.
Yes.
And an incredible journey that started the first time you did psychedelics. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Yes. Well, yes, it did. It was something I had never done this before. So I did psychedelics when I was late in life, and the whole world changed for me.
Yeah. So I'd love to have you start by sharing, give us a little idea of sort of like, who were you up until then? Like, how were you brought up? How were you raised? When someone says, well, I didn't do psychedelics until late in life, and then I completely reinvented myself.
Yeah.
The first question is like, we got to find out who you were first.
Yeah,
so what was your background?
You have to understand my beginnings. I was brought up in a very rigid religious home. My dad was a preacher, and of course, I was always taught that anything to do with drugs was sinful. And it was a really rigid life, but I tried to kind of break away from it when I was a young adult. And then for some reason, it was comfortable to me. So I went back into religion. And I just kind of lived my life kind of like that. And probably when I hit my 70s, I began to think, there should be more to life than all of this. And I had a son who was a psychiatrist in New York for about 30 years. And at that time, he was going through a midlife crisis. And he had never done drugs either. And one of his friends suggested that he should go do ayahuasca. So he called me and he said, I'm going to do some ayahuasca. It's the first time I've ever done it. Of course, I had no idea what that was. And he explained it to me. Well, he went to Brazil and he did this ayahuasca journey. And he called me on the way home and he was so excited. He said, I have been transformed. And I was shown something while I did ayahuasca. You have to do this before you die. Well, of course, it shocked me, but I was at the place where, hey, nothing makes sense anyway. So I said, yeah, I'll do it. He set me up with an ayahuasca journey.
So,
I was 70.
Wait a minute. How old were you?
I was 75 at the time. And
you were 75 and you just were like, oh, what the hell? Like, yeah. I mean, what was going on in your world that you were even open to that?
There was nothing going on. I was totally bored. And I decided I'll try something new. So I said, okay, and I did it. And it was mind-blowing that there is actually a real spiritual world. It's not something you hear about all the time. And it really helped me a lot.
In what way did it help you?
It opened me up. My whole intention when I went was, what is this religious world all about? What are the beginnings of all of these religions? This one says they're right. That one says they're right. And I struggled with that a lot in my life, trying to figure it out. And I'd been to so many churches, trying to find truth. So I went into the ayahuasca journey wanting to understand religion more. And I had the most fantastic experience. I was in my mind, I was in a beautiful jeweled temple, like a palace. Everything in there was made of jewels. And it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And when I looked at the ceiling, it was a dome. And in the middle were three symbols: the Christian cross, the Om, and the yin yang symbol. And I was told as I looked at that, it's all the same source. You've been looking outside, look inside yourself. It's all the same source. It all came from the same place and it all has the same meaning. And I can't even tell you how the understanding that gave me. And I was so happy because I was seeing all these beautiful jewels all over people. There's so much going on in my mind. And I just fell in love with all of that world, that world I'd never been to. So about a year later, called me, he had discovered this medicine called Bufo Alvarius, which was a toad medicine. And he had been looking for something to help his patients. He had been giving them pharmaceuticals for so many years, and he wasn't seeing the improvement that he wanted to see. So he discovered Bufo Alvarius, this toad medicine, and started using it and found out that it was just a miraculous thing. So he called me. I was in Texas. He was in New York. And he said, Mother, you've got to come back to New York. I have something else for you to experience. Well, I was excited about the first thing I had experienced. I said, okay. Got on a plane and went up there. And a man from Mexico was there serving, and they briefly explained it to me. I didn't care what the explanation was. Just give it to me. If it was better than that.
Was that always is that how you used to roll? Were you kind of always like that? Oh, I don't care. Let's just go with it. Or had you sort of hit?
I was never like that. I mean, I smoked a cigarette when I was 14. I took a puff of a cigarette and I felt guilty for 5 years. It was like that. I was not open to anything. And so I guess ayahuasca really opened me up. And I thought, hey, this is a good world. And I was ready to try any of the others. So it was Bufo next. And after that, I had suffered from depression most of my life. And after I did Bufo, I didn't feel depressed anymore. I didn't even know how depressed I was. The Bufo removed that. And I had a whole new outlook on life after that.
So what was the outlook before? And what was the outlook after? Like, how did you recognize, boy, I was really depressed in hindsight?
Well, I realized I was depressed in my mid-50s. I was not really enthusiastic about much of anything, and I had kind of felt sad all the time, and I had a homesickness, like I need to go home, but I didn't know where home was. And I just felt that all the time, kind of heavy and depressed. I thought it was just normal. And when after the ayahuasca, I had discovered some new feelings that I had never had before, which was wonder and curiosity and all of that. And so when I experienced the Bufo, I didn't feel heavy anymore. I felt my logic seemed better.
Like overnight?
Instantly. When I woke up. And the people that were there, a couple of people there, they said, you look so different. But I felt like I had lost all this heavy feelings, chains falling off of me. It was just amazing. And I thought, well, I don't know what to think about all of this, but I began to have a new train of thought, like, I want to get out of the big city. I want to get around nature. I need to move someplace so I can die. Because I had lived my life in the workplace, and the time had come that I had to retire. I mean, I was getting old, and I knew my life wouldn't last much longer. So I decided to move to Santa Fe. And I bought some acreage out there. I moved out there to just live and die. And that was it. I didn't have any goals, nothing.
But you weren't depressed. But you just were like,
I was just
this is where I'm going to live. And
I was content to get out of the city and go live on the land and just enjoy myself. And no, I was not depressed. I moved out. I bought some acreage out about 25 miles out of Santa Fe. I was totally off grid, living out there on a mountain by myself, and just became a mountain woman and just loved it. And well, when I first moved to Santa Fe, he was there because of COVID. He was staying with a friend because he couldn't get back to New York. The flights were canceled. And he put together a ceremony out in Diablo Canyon, which is a beautiful canyon, not far from Santa Fe, and he wanted me to come. Now, I had done Bufo that one time. A year later, I had done a very light dose, and that was all I had done it. So we went out.
And just for listeners, before you do that, like describe what a ceremony is and what that looks like.
Okay, a ceremony is where when he discovered this, he did it in Mexico. And this is something they do there because the toads are there. And they have the people come together and they serve a person one at a time. And it's a very sacred thing for them. The toads are considered very sacred. They come up from the ground once a year, and their gills are full of this venom that would actually be poisonous if you tasted it, drank it. And somehow they discovered that this venom, if you just inhale the fumes from it, it did miraculous things to you. So even when the children are 13, they have a ritual for those children. And this is what they do. They inhale this bufo, which makes them, it's what they say, come of age. But it's a very sacred ceremony. So some of John's and people he knew had heard about it and they wanted to do it. It wasn't very well known in the U.S. at that time. This was about 6 years ago, I guess. And about 5 years ago when he had this ceremony. So a few people were coming. His helper was there. My grandson was there. And we were waiting for them to come and said, I think it's time for you to do Bufo again, Mother. And I hadn't planned on doing it. I had not planned on it because I thought I'm happy, I'm content. I said,
Uh-huh.
okay. So
And just to explain for listeners too, like Bufo, which is now very much more popular than it was then, but it's known as like the God drug, and it literally just takes your ego completely out of the picture
you're doing a
offline.
good job of explaining it, a much better job than I'm doing. It's known as the God molecule. This substance they dry the substance and they break it up in little flakes, put it in a little glass tube and put a lighter under it, and the fume comes out and you inhale the fume one time, one big inhale, and that's all you do. It is known as the God molecule because you go offline. You should be totally not aware of what's around you for about 10 minutes or so. And that's when these molecules start working in your system. It's like having an upgrade on a computer. It reprograms your brain. And it's just a miraculous thing. I didn't understand it when I did it, and I didn't understand it when I did it the third time, but I had a fabulous experience on that third time.
What happened? What happened the third time?
It's not something that you're supposed to hallucinate with. A lot of people don't even remember, but they wake up feeling good. Well, what happened is I went out, and suddenly I was aware that we were surrounded by hundreds of Native American spirits, ancestor spirits. They were surrounding us. They were watching us, and they began to speak to me in their native tongue, and I understood them completely. I didn't realize that I was translating this message at the time, that I was speaking this language, out loud, because he was recording it and I didn't know it. I was communicating with these people. I was communicating in their language and they were speaking to me in their language. And they were telling me that this medicine, they've been waiting for hundreds of years to watch the earth wake up. That this medicine was so important and it was a part of the process of what was happening now to help people wake up. And that I was to tell what he was doing, what his helpers were doing, was one of the most important things in this world right now. And that he would be spreading this all over the world, helping people awaken to this new dimension. And they were so excited to be involved in being able to watch the earth wake up and move into a higher dimension. So I was just blabbering this information, and so suddenly I started speaking in English so that he could understand it, and they began to record it. And when I woke up, I opened my eyes. I was lying down, and the three of them were over me, looking at me with tears running down their face. And I thought, what's wrong? Did I die? I said, what's happening? And they began to tell me what I told them. And they were so touched by it. And it was so beautiful. It was so vivid. But the most important thing to me happened a few minutes later when the people started arriving after they were settled and started the ceremony, and he served them one at a time. And what happens? You stand up. He's in front of you with a pipe. He helps you inhale. Someone's behind you. And as you once you inhale, you just kind of go offline and you relax. And the person behind you lays you down and lets you just be very non-disturbed as long as you need it. So they began to serve the people. And the first person they served, I was just sitting and observing, and I began to have visions about that person. This was new to me. And I thought, what's happening? But I journeyed.
Did you think you were just like still under the spell of the drug or something?
I was not, because it doesn't last very long. Within an hour, you're totally back to normal. But I was beginning to see things. I was tapping into her journey. And I was beginning to see things that were going on with her, inside of her, and experiences that she was having. And I could see it all. And I don't know how, but somehow John knew that I was experiencing this also. So while she was under, John came to me and asked, "Do you see anything about her?" And I said, "Well, why do you ask?" And he said, "Well, I need to know." And I said, "Well, yes." And he said, "Well, what are you seeing?" And I said, "I don't think I should talk about it because it was something so personal. And it was bad. It was not a good thing I was seeing." And he said, "Mother, you need to tell me because I've been working with her for several months and nothing is changing. I can't get through to her. I don't know what's wrong." So I told him, and what I had seen in the beginning with her was a dark entity standing beside her, and around his wrist was a chain. The chain was connected to something around her neck, and I knew that he totally controlled her life. And I knew that this was not a good thing because he was not a good entity. And so I explained it to John, and he said, "Oh, that makes so much sense." So he worked with her differently after that. He was a psychiatrist. And I was startled that I had seen this. The next person came, it happened again. I saw these things that happened to her in her childhood that had caused this trauma in her childhood. And that happened with every person. And I didn't know what to think about it. But I realize now, 6 years, 5 years later, that what I was seeing was what Bufo was releasing. We have learned that Bufo releases trauma from your system. Everything I see is not bad. I see some beautiful things, some beautiful spiritual experiences. I see some past lives. I see something that's going on right now or maybe in the future. It's always different. But it took me a while to understand what I was seeing and to actually believe what I was seeing. And after that, if John asked me to come hold space for him, I would always have visions about people. So this went on for a couple of years, and John began to train me in Bufo and let me work with him. Are you ready to move into the big story now, or do you have more questions?
Almost, but I want to ask, I mean, some people are going to listen to this and be like, this is crazy. Like, what are we even talking about, right? So, I mean, and I can't imagine there was anyone in your world previously that you could just say, "Oh, and so this is what John and I went away for the weekend and this is what happened." And
I couldn't even tell what I did. Everybody I knew was religious, but I have another son and a daughter. And when we told my other son, he was so upset with John. He said, "You're ruining our mother." And of course, laughed at him, Everyone was upset. Everyone that knew about it was upset, but I didn't tell any of my friends. And when this happened, I thought, what? I don't know the purpose of this. I don't know why I'm seeing all these things.
It sounds like he had a sense that you had some type of a sense that was being developed. Did you ever have a sense that you had an ability that maybe you weren't aware of or you weren't harnessing, or did it make sense in hindsight? Like, there was something.
Yeah, there was something there. I knew I was more sensitive than a lot of people to feelings and things like I could feel people, and I didn't understand why I was feeling these people. I didn't want to do that because sometimes it wasn't pleasant. I didn't understand it. I had nobody to talk to about it. I had a few when I was 16. My first vision, I was getting ready for school and the mirror disappeared. And suddenly there was a picture of this little girl that looked like she was about 2 years old. And she was so cute, and she was looking at me and smiling. And I remembered what she had on. I remembered exactly the way she looked, and then it disappeared. And I thought, what in the world? That's the first thing I'd ever experienced. And 10 years later, that vision came true. It was my daughter. And she turned,
Wow.
the exact same picture. She turned around and looked at me, and there it was. So there was some kind of premonition going on, and I had dreams, but I didn't think too much about it. And then when I was in my 20s, I discovered a book about psychic phenomena that Russia was working on. They were working on psychic phenomena. And I read that and I thought, I think I can do some of these things. But I didn't really try to find out a lot more about it. I did I read some things that I could, but like I said, I didn't know anyone who experienced these things, so I didn't talk about it. And my grandmother's spirit would come to me, communicate with me. Tried to talk to my mother about that, but she it scared her. So I just didn't talk to people. Okay. So, but it was
Yeah. And what about when you married? Did you speak to your husband about it when you married?
my children's father, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, I didn't talk to anybody about it because I knew I didn't know anyone who experienced these things. And so I just didn't, I kept it to myself. So somehow this was in me and it had to be unlocked, and Bufo unlocked it. And it's for a very, very important reason. I guess I wasn't ready for it before, I guess. I don't know. Or maybe I was afraid of it.
Yeah.
And, but, there were times in my life where I received specific guidance through either a dream or some feeling. So I knew there was something supernatural out there someplace. But I'd given up on all that. I thought I'll never found the answers. And when I became an old woman, I really gave up on it and just moved out there, like I said, to live and die. But after I met a woman within a few months after I had moved here, a young, in her 50s, through a Bufo ceremony. And she and I connected, and I felt like I felt like I'd known her. And I wasn't big into past lives either at that time. But this woman and I connected, and she befriended me. And she asked both of us to come for Christmas. And this was after I'd been here 2 years. And she had invited her father up from Houston. And his wife had died a few months before. He was kind of grieving. And she said, Dad, I've asked an older woman to come to dinner, and I think you might enjoy talking to her. I'm not trying to set you up or anything, but you might enjoy talking to her. And that was it. And so we went, and I met him, and I felt very comfortable around him, like I might have known him maybe in Texas or something, even though I knew I'd never met him. And we talked.
And how old were you at this point?
I
How
was
old were you?
79,
Okay.
and he was 81, and had made this trip for Christmas. I was supposed to go to Texas for Christmas, and Christmas Day, something told me, do not go to Texas. So I told John, I'm not supposed to go to Texas, but, Clara has invited us to her house, so let's go to her house for dinner. Met this man. Clara had talked to her dad about Bufo. He had never done drugs either. He was having kind of a hard time getting over the death of his wife. And she said, Dad, would you consider having a a mind-blowing experience? He said, yes. He said, I was so bored with life. I didn't care.
Wow.
But he had never done anything either. But so she set him up for Bufo the next day, the day after Christmas. And John served, and I held space. There were probably 3 or 4 people there, but I was concerned about him because of his age. I mean, I know that I was strong at my age, but I didn't know how he was. And I'd never been around older people who had done Bufo. And so I decided I would watch him. I would sit close by him and hold space and make sure he was okay. So I was just sitting there watching him as looked like he was sleeping. And he suddenly he started to roll over. And I thought, oh, I hope he's not going to be sick or something. And I reached out and touched his arm to stabilize him. And when I did, I had a vision of him and me together as children playing in a field.
Oh my God.
What? I'd seen these things about other people, but I never saw myself involved. And I thought, oh, I could see the surroundings. It was like a horse and buggy. We were in a field. We were laughing and running and playing. We're about 6 years old. And I thought, oh, maybe he's my brother from another lifetime. I was really intrigued. But here's the thing. My whole adult life, I was married 13 years, and I was single about 50 years of my adult life.
Wow.
And I had sworn I would never get married again, and I didn't want to be involved with anybody. And in later years, I never dated or anything. And so the first thing I thought.
Why did you never date? Why did you swear that?
I had a really bad abusive marriage, and I didn't trust men after that. And I dated some, and I considered marrying, but I just wouldn't do it. And so as I got older, I thought, no, I'm content with my life, and I'm not going to try to find somebody, and I just don't care anymore. Well, the first thing that came into my mind when I saw this vision, and I thought, I don't want to know about this man, or if you're whoever's doing this to me, if you're trying to show me something, I really don't want to know. But it wouldn't go away. The picture wouldn't go away. And I didn't know if it's showing me a brother or somebody that I knew in the past. I didn't know. So I just stayed there a minute, seeing that and trying to push it away, but it wouldn't go away. And finally I said, okay, if you're trying to show me something, I'm ready. Show me. I saw another picture, and it was him and me, and maybe 12 years old this time. And he was pushing me in a swing, and we were laughing again. And I thought, well,
And was it like an old time? Was it like a previous lifetime, an older time?
It was, I mean, it looked like it might've been the 1800s, late 1800s, something like that. And then another picture, we were riding horseback together, and we were laughing, and every one of them, we were laughing. And then I saw one, we were 18. It was like a slideshow going on, we were 18 and we were dancing together. And then I knew he's not my brother. So evidently our families had lived close together. We were together a lot at that time. And there was a space. I didn't see anything. And then I saw him as a very old man on his deathbed. And he was dying. And there was an old woman sitting beside him. I didn't notice her at first. But then I saw her and looked, and it was me. And we were very old.
Oh my God.
And I suddenly felt this powerful spiritual love between these two people. And it was so overwhelming that I started crying. And what really got me about it wasn't like I was watching myself, but it was like I was watching somebody else. They still loved each other. They were old. I'd known so many marriages that were bad. I'd seen so many older people that couldn't stand each other, even though we were married 80 years, They didn't like each other by the time they got that old. And what impressed me so much was that they still loved each other. And it was a powerful spiritual kind of love. It wasn't anything I had known. And I started crying. And I thought,
And you weren't on anything. Like you were not on anything. You were
no.
just witnessing his journey
I was just there
and having vision.
trying to help him. Yeah. And I started crying. I couldn't stop. And I thought, I don't know what's happening, but I've got to get away from this man and get my head straight. So I got up and went in the kitchen, and John was in there. He knows that I see things about people, and he thought I had seen something about, his name is Barry, about Barry. Maybe he was sick, dying, So he came over to me and he said, did you see something about Clara's dad? And I said, yes. And he said, what? And I said, I don't want to talk about it. And he said, why? And I said, it's personal. And he didn't understand that, and he said, tell me what's going on. And he wouldn't leave me alone. So I finally told him. He said, that's incredible. I said, it's something. I don't know what it is. And I wouldn't go back in there. I stayed in the kitchen. So when Barry finished his ceremony, he went out to the car and waited for his daughter. And then Clara decided to, it was time for her to leave. So she came in the kitchen to tell me goodbye. And she hugged me and said goodbye. And John said, did you tell her about her dad? I said, no, I don't want to tell her. She said, well, what? They both started in on me then. I finally told her. She said, what? Was he your brother? I said, I don't think so. Well, she was in shock. I said, look, Clara, I very sincerely said, please don't say anything. Keep this under your hat. I don't know what this is all about. She just smiled at me and went on out to the car. I didn't know, but she got in the car and immediately told him about it.
Mm.
So I had that to ponder, that evening, and I still couldn't figure out what it was all about. And then I dismissed it. And she called the next day and invited us to a presentation that one of her friends was giving at her house 3 days after Christmas. And she wanted John and I to come because this was a really interesting Shakespearean mathematical code breaking information, so we were excited to go. So we went back. and everybody had a place to sit, and we filled in all the chairs. And I noticed that beside me, there was only one empty chair left, and it was beside me. And in a minute, here came Barry, and he sat down in that chair. And he looked at me and he said, I understand we've known each other before. And I didn't know what to say. I thought, I'm going to kill Clara. That's what I thought. And I said, well, from what I saw, yeah, we've known each other before. And he said, well, maybe we should get to know each other. And I thought,
Wow.
uh-oh, here it comes, And I changed the subject, and I said, oh, do you remember anything from when you were under Bufo? Did you experience anything that you remember? He said, yes. My late wife came to me and she talked to me. Her voice, it was her voice. And she told me she was in a very happy place and that she didn't need me anymore. And that I needed to go on with my life. And I thought, wow, that's different. And that was about it. We didn't talk much anymore after that because we went home right after the presentation. And he left the next day and went back to Texas. So that night that he got home, yeah, he just went away. I said,
oh my gosh,
I don't want to get to know him really, but maybe in a year or so. I mean, I felt comfortable around him, and I thought maybe he'll come back to see Claire in a year or so. We'll go out to dinner or something, and if we're supposed to get to know each other, we will. So he went back home the next day, and he called me that night. He got my number from Clara. We talked 3 hours, and I could feel that spiritual feeling again when we talked. And I didn't know what to think about it. He called me every night, and we talked for 3 hours every night, and it felt so good. And my son was in the other room all those nights, and he was telling Sarah everything, and I did not know that. And he was saying, they're acting like teenagers. She's in there giggling. And so I could feel that. I knew that somehow we belonged together somehow, and that we had been together. So the third night, he said, at our age, we can't even buy green bananas because we don't have time for them to ripen. And he said, we don't have much time left. What would you think about getting married? And I said, oh, dear. And I said, well, when we're together again, if we still feel this way, then I'm open to it. Well, he came back 10 days later. He came back to Santa
oh my gosh.
And by that time, we knew that we were going to get married. I thought it was hilarious, because he could hear all this stuff going on. And he was informing Clara. They just thought it was fun. So when he came back, we went up to Clara's that night, and we told him we were going to get married. And Clara said, I didn't see that coming. And so they were all shocked, And they said, well, when are you going to get married? And we said, well, as soon as we can figure it out, because we don't have a lot of time left. And they thought it was great. And we let them plan the date because we wanted them to both be in town. And Clara said, okay, you'll have it at my house. And we said, we want you to do the ceremony. And she said, me? I said, yeah, you're the one that we came together under Bufo, And so he got his little license or whatever he needed so he could perform the ceremony. And 3 months later, they picked out St. Patrick's Day as the date. And that was yesterday. We celebrated our 3 years. 3 years.
Oh, 3 years yesterday.
3 years. But we married out at her house, and there were about 70. This was the interesting part. There were about 75 people there. We only knew maybe 5 out of all those people.
Wait.
I said, where they
Who
come?
were they?
They were people who had called Clara. Clara said, you're the talk of the town. You two are the talk of the town. These old people who met under Bufo, and they're getting married, and everybody wants to come to the wedding. So they were calling her and saying, can you come to the wedding? We want to meet these people. So we had a big house full. And so we had, and since I have Cherokee ancestry, we had a Native American wedding, and it was just beautiful. And that's the story. That's how we got together.
Wow. And when you and I met and you told me that story, I just thought, gosh, I just want to have you on the Intuition Incubator because it's, especially when you told of how 50 years. You didn't date, you had no intention of marrying. You had moved to a mountain house to live out your days,
I picked out the plot.
to live and die. Yeah, and when you were telling me that story, you were like, I had a whole new life. Like I completely reinvented myself. And I think when we were talking, my thought was like, wow, like people need to hear this because people at my age, 55, people at 45, are thinking, oh, eh, I'm too old to blah, 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 blah. Right? Like what, I can't embark on a new career now. I can't, and so many women, I think, get divorced, and you were probably one of them, and have a really painful experience and think,
Very painful.
you know, it's
Bringing
not worth it.
up three children by myself, and I thought if their own father couldn't love them and be good to them, what is another man going to do who doesn't even know them or have that connection? And I was very protective of them in that area and bringing them up by
So
myself.
now what would you, knowing what you know now, how would you counsel people who were in your position, who are in your position now that you were in then? What would you say differently to people who are feeling like that's it for me?
Well, like I said, I've suffered from depression a lot, but I also was very active and I stayed active mainly to keep myself going. I mean, I camped a lot. I rode horses. I did a lot of things and just stayed active, I guess to keep from feeling, not mainly. But I would tell them that there is help. There is something that is there to help your system, to help you be healthy, to help you be happy, to help you think better, more clearly, to give you direction. And that's what I did not have. And believe it or not, Bufo gave me that. A little tiny dab of toad venom changed my life. And I like to think of it. You've heard the fairy tale of the princess who kissed the toad and he turned into a prince. I kissed a toad,
Yeah,
not a prince, even if I was an old
you
woman, but I
did.
guess,
You totally did.
I had a lot of lessons to learn through some of the things I went through. But there is another way people can live now. You don't have to live like that. There's help. And there's a whole new exciting dimension that you can enter. And one of the things that impressed me about Barry, and I wouldn't have married him if I had known this and it hadn't changed. I think it was the 34th day we talked. He said, "Something's wrong with me," and I said, "What?" He said, "I have been a functioning alcoholic most of my adult life, and I have no desire for alcohol. I've tried to drink it and I can't drink it, and I don't know what's going on." I said, "It's the Bufo." I'm sorry.
Yes, I know it does wonders for addiction, or it can at least.
It breaks
Yeah.
addictions. It does all kinds of things. There's like 20 something molecules in it, and each molecule has a job and works on different parts of your life and your body and your past. It works on everything. But he told me he couldn't drink anymore. At the time I thought if I had known that, if you had not stopped that, I wouldn't have married him because I've been involved with that. I couldn't handle that. But it changed him. It changed me. And he's told me 2 or 3 times how much he's changed since he did Bufo. And of course, I didn't know him before,
And he just did it once. He did it once. He's not
just
on the
once.
rodeo with you.
For our honeymoon, we didn't take a honeymoon until November, and we went to Egypt with John's Bufo group. And it was an amazing experience. And he did Bufo the second time on that trip. So he's done it maybe 3 or 4 times. But the really cute part was he wanted to go on this trip. He said, "Let's do Bufo at the same time, and our spirits will come together and we'll have this wonderful time together." I said, "Okay." I doubted that, but I said, "Okay." And so we did. We were there on the boat, the deck of the boat, floating down the Nile at sunset, and we were served Bufo at the same time by two different people. And both went out and laid down. Suddenly I was with Moses in Egypt. That's where I was. Peter, he told me, "I was with my mother. We weren't together at all." So he said, "Well, that didn't work." I said, "That's right." But it's always a new experience.
right. Yeah, it's such an amazing story. And I can only imagine, like, do you kind of keep to your circles, or do you ever have these conversations with people who are just like, they just think you're crazy or you're wacky? Or do you like try and, if you know people that have depression, do you try and say, hey, there's
Yes.
another way? Or do you just kind of stay away from it? Like, how do you deal with people who are just like, you're nuts, like,
If I
they don't understand.
I feel anything like that, if they tell me anything like that, I say, I have something that will help you. I definitely tell them. Some people think it's nutty and they won't have anything to do with it. Well, that's okay. I plant the seed. I think the first time I did that, I had gone into a lady's house here in Santa Fe to buy something that she had for sale. And I don't talk about it unless I feel guided to talk about it. But I walked into her house and suddenly something said to me, you have to tell her about Bufo. And I thought, oh dear, I don't even know this woman. How am I going to talk to her about Bufo? I'm not here for anything like that. And suddenly I noticed on a little table, she had a set of tuning forks, chakra tuning forks. And I thought, okay, she's into some kind of new age thing here. I can tell by that. So I just started talking about her tuning forks. And she was talking to me about that. And I said, by the way, have you ever heard of something called Bufo? She said, no, what is that? I explained it to her and she said, you have been sent to me. I have been waiting for something to come to me. And of course,
Uh,
it's Bufo, a couple of days later, but there's always an indication, or maybe they'll say something that will open up a conversation where I can talk about it. Otherwise, I
yeah.
don't talk about it. But
And
I
do you do anything else with your superpowers? When you're just going about your regular life, do you continue to see past other people's past lives or visions or things like that? What have you learned about when that information comes to you? What have you learned to do?
I've learned to share it if it comes. I was very hesitant to share it, even with the Bufo people at first, because I thought they're not going to believe me. Why would they believe that I saw this stuff? But
Yeah.
John was the one who encouraged it, and he would say, Mother, did you see anything about this person? And when he would ask me that, I would think, well, I'm going to have to say it, because I didn't want to lie and say no, because sometimes it wasn't pleasant.
Most people that are doing Bufo are people that would want to know, right? That's why
Yeah,
they're doing it, to get an
that's what
answer, to
I learned.
find information.
I learned that, and then sometimes the things I tell them really help them understand certain things. Maybe understand why they have a tendency in this life for doing something. If I've seen a past life, or if I've seen a death, a traumatic death, um, maybe they've suffered something in this life similar and didn't understand it. I've learned that and even John explains that these experiences we have, especially traumatic experiences in past lives, stays in our cellular system. Somehow it's in our DNA and it can be brought up. And Bufo likes to remove all those triggers. It likes to clean your system out. And some of the most traumatic things that you have felt will come forth. And if I'm tapped into that person's journey, I see them. And sometimes it's a really, really helps to explain to the person and let them talk about it and let them say, well, yeah, that happened to me when I was a baby and blah, blah, blah. And usually the people who come to vote accept reincarnation and they know they've lived before and they're very happy to find out some of the details. So,
About it, right.
yeah, and I feel like it
And
is.
how has it changed, or has it changed your view or your personal feelings about death? I mean, you saw a picture of you and Barry, him in his deathbed, and you, before you even started this whole thing, you were going to live and die, and how do you look at that now? Did you ever have fear about death? Do you have less
I
fear now?
used to fear it, but I had a couple of near death experiences. And one of them, I actually did die briefly, and I saw what's beyond. And it was the most beautiful, loving thing I've ever experienced. I've never experienced that kind of love in this lifetime. So I knew that I was going to a wonderful place if I did die. So I didn't fear it anymore. I don't fear it. For a while, it was like, I'm ready to go. I don't have anything here to hold me here. I'm ready to go on. It's one of those old gospel songs talk about moving off this earth. And, I understood that. And now I have a reason to live. And it's a beautiful thing to be able to help people and to have the means to know you can help change their lives and you can watch them grow and watch them change. It's a beautiful thing. Even my three of my grandsons have experienced Bufo, and I've been able to be there
Wow.
and watch that. And I've had some other relatives have come and done it, but a lot of people are totally against it. As far as my old Dallas friends, I've told a couple of them, but that's it, because they weren't the
Yeah.
kind who were into this type of thing. But I'm not hesitant to talk about it when I know I'm supposed to. And I think that's part of it's part of the calling. It's part of the work. You plant the seeds
It is.
and let the seed grow. Some people embrace it, and then some people won't want to do anything with it. And then maybe 4 or 5 years later, they're thinking, I remember hearing about this. Maybe I should do that. So, like,
Yeah. I think planting the seed is,
yeah,
like you say, that's the most you can do, right?
right. I think he's been serving it for about 7 years now, and he has served over 13,000 people all over the world. So, and he knows that this is his work. He has to spread this, and he's very happy doing it. He loves his work, and I love it. And I serve here in Santa Fe in my home.
You do on your own.
I have a beautiful, beautiful medicine room that my husband has allowed me to dedicate to Bufo. So he's very
Wow.
understanding. And he does feel that this is my work. He says, this is your work. I'm here. I'm here for you. I will ground you, but this is your work. So it's great.
Wow. And are you open to people reaching out to you to talk to you?
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. And how do you want people to do that? If someone, would it be, you probably don't have a website or anything, but maybe if they reached out to me and asked me
That'd be
specifically,
great. Yes, I'd be glad for
I
them
could
to.
share your
Mhm.
email or something with them.
They could text me, send me an email, and we could set up a time to talk. Um, you asked before, how do I deal with this just in everyday life without Bufo, without being in a Bufo setting? I have had a few instances where, like, I'll hug somebody and suddenly I see a past life. I'll give you one
Yeah.
example. I met a woman and we were just talking, and suddenly I had a past life vision about her. And I thought, I don't think I should say anything to her right now. And this was on our trip to Egypt. And I didn't know whether I should even talk about it to her at the time. But I went back to my room and I laid down, and the vision came stronger and stronger. And I was told, the next time you see her, you tell her. So I saw her the next day at lunch. And she just happened, of course, to come and sit down right beside me. And so during the course of lunch, I said, I have something I need to tell you. And I told her, and it answered all these questions about why her mother had been so abusive to her. And she started crying and she said, thank you. Thank you for telling me that. And then I think it was the next day, her husband came to me and he said, you have done something that's helped change her by telling her what you said. So she believed it, and I knew it was true. And now she and I are good friends. And now she's,
Yeah, and it just goes to your point of, like, that you're helping someone, and what a beautiful mission.
and that's why we're here, to help each other, to help each other better ourselves, to help each other move into a higher dimension, to enjoy what we can. And to go from a 79-year-old bored woman to an older, I call myself a medicine woman now because I've had so many experiences with this type of thing and helping people where I'm just working with that person. Bufo's not involved. Sometimes it is, but by being able to actually go in there and journey with a person and make changes in their lives, it's a beautiful thing. It's a gift. And I have that to look forward to for the rest of my life. And if I live to be 120, I'm still going to be doing this. If not, I'll be in a beautiful, happy, loving place and be very
So
grateful.
I always ask people this one last question. I always say, if you could leave people with anything, if you could tell people the one thing that's the most important thing for them to know, what would you like to let people know?
To go within yourself and find yourself, which is something I did not do for, years and years and years. I was seeking that love and that the answers, and I was seeking outside of myself. It's not there. It's inside yourself, and use the tools that we've been given. The tools that are related to earth and to nature will change your life. Those medicines will change your life. They're beautiful. They're not something that need to be hidden and secretive and no. They're here for. It's a gift. They're given to us.
I would like to say, first of all, I want to thank you so much for being here. And on that last note, I want to remind people that the Intuition Incubator is not making any recommendations. We're not held liable. There's no legal responsibility here. If you would like to reach out further to Joanne to talk more about this, absolutely. I do want to have this be a place where, I've always said since the very beginning when I was a psychotherapist, I wanted to have a room where people could talk about anything.
Mm-hmm.
And the Intuition Incubator is, now like on steroids on a much larger level with everything that's, happening in the world.
Right.
Like this is a place we get to talk about everything, but we're not making recommendations. I don't have a lawyer, but I'm sure that's something I'm supposed to say.
Yeah. Well,
But Joanne, go ahead. Sorry.
I appreciate the opportunity because it's the love of my life. It's changed my life. It continues to change my life. So, yeah, shout it from the rooftops for me and put me in jail.
Yes, and that's why I wanted to have you. I feel so blessed to have met you. I'm so thankful to have met you. And thank you so much for being here today.
You're so welcome. It's my pleasure. Believe me. Yeah, I appreciate it. I really do. So good to be with you again.